everybody, welcome to Adapt or Perish, episode 38, Brokeback Mountain. Before we get into the show today, I had a couple of words that I wanted to say regarding something that has been in the news this week that we've been following, that I know a lot of you have as well. We were shocked and upset, as I know many of you were, to hear the news about Alex Trebek's health, about his cancer diagnosis. And since I know that many of you came to the show in the first place because of my Jeopardy appearance, it didn't seem right to just kind of let it pass without saying something. So being on Jeopardy definitely was literally a lifelong dream of mine. Alex Trebek has been the host of the show for as long as I've been alive. Literally, the new version of the show with him as the host started in 1984, which was the year I was born. So that is something that has been a constant in my life. And being on the show has really changed my life in many ways, not least of which is that we gained many of you as an audience. And so I know that Alex Trebek's legacy as the host of Jeopardy will be felt and is felt in many, many ways. I know that there is a strong and wonderful community of former Jeopardy contestants that have all been pretty devastated this week by this news, and all of our thoughts are with Alex and with his family. I know Jeremy and I have been thinking about him a lot this week, just to kind of send that energy out into the world. So if you wanted to add your thoughts to ours, I know that would be appreciated. Thoughts, prayers, whatever your personal kind of belief about sending good wishes someone's way. I think that would be a lovely gesture. There's very little we can do, of course, but good thoughts I think are always appreciated. All right. On a slightly lighter note, I want to talk about our next episode. After the sort of exploration of the American West with True Grit and Brokeback Mountain, we are moving on to another country. And I was going to say that this was going to be a bit of a light snack after the sort of deep themes that we get into in this episode that you're about to listen to. But I thought about it a little bit more, and we do talk quite a bit about, generational trauma and the legacy of the atomic bomb. That's right. We're talking about Godzilla. So in the next episode, in 2 weeks from now, we will be discussing the 1954 original movie, Godzilla, the Japanese film, the 1956 American semi-remake called Godzilla King of the Monsters. We'll explain it in the episode. The 1998 American remake starring Matthew Broderick, the 2014 American remake, and the 2016 Japanese film called Shin Godzilla. So we'll be discussing all of those in 2 weeks. And now, on with the show, episode 38, Annie Proulx, Brokeback Mountain.
Hello, and welcome to Adapt or Perish. My name is Jeremy Latour.
And I'm Arielle Lipshaw.
Do we have to do this?
Yeah, let's just do it.
Okay.
Happy New Year,
Happy
everybody.
New Year.
Even if it is not New Year when you are currently listening to this, just to give you a peek behind the curtain here, we are recording this on New Year's Eve day 2018. This is how we have chosen to close this year for you, our listeners, by bumming ourselves out.
We did this to ourselves. For you.
What are we talking about today?
We're talking about that great happy-go-lucky movie, Brokeback Mountain.
Now that's the one with the singing and dancing cowboys, home on the range, like dancing, smiling cows and stuff.
I'm like struggling to be funny about this. Okay, so full disclosure, I had never read this short story and I had never seen this movie.
Yes.
I had avoided it for how many? Like 13 years?
13 years. Well, what year did this come out? Like 2006?
Five.
Yes. I saw this movie in the theater.
Did it destroy you
Yes,
utterly?
Completely.
Yeah. I had never seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other night, for the very first time, I finally watched Brokeback Mountain. I don't know if I can be funny. I'm trying. really hard.
We're going to do our best.
Oh my goodness.
We're going to do our best. Should we just jump in? Should we just kind of like...
Please.
All right. So in 1998,
1997. I actually have the details right here.
I don't know why I'm 1 year off on everything today.
It's okay. So this story, Brokeback Mountain, was originally published in The New Yorker on October 13th, 1997 by Annie Proulx. It won a whole bunch of awards. It won the National Magazine Award for Fiction in 1998. It won the O. Henry Prize. It was very popular.
It was well regarded.
Yes.
Yes. So for those who don't know, I'm going to do... Should I just jump into back of the book? I have here a copy of the book.
Do it.
I'm going to skip the part where it says all the awards that it won. Ennis Del Mar and Jack Twist, two ranch hands, come together when they're working as sheep herder and camp tender one summer on a range above the tree line. At first, sharing an isolated tent, the attraction is casual, inevitable, but something deeper catches them that summer. Both men work hard, marry, and have kids because that's what cowboys do. But over the course of many years and frequent separations, this relationship becomes the most important thing in their lives, and they do anything they can to preserve it. In gorgeous, haunting prose, Proulx limbs. That is a word I don't know.
Can I see it?
Yeah.
That sure is what that word is.
Literally a word I've never seen before. I assume it has something to do with like liminality. Limns. I've never seen that used as a verb before. Anyway. The difficult, dangerous affair between two cowboys that survives everything but the world's violent intolerance. What do you think of that description?
I think it's apt.
I have a couple quibbles with it, but like, it's okay. I mean, I guess my main quibble with all of this is they're constantly referred to as cowboys. There's not a single cow in this movie. There's no cows whatsoever. No cows at all.
I mean, cowboy's more of a...
There's like horses and sheep and mules.
I feel like cowboy's more of a kind of you know one when you see one type thing.
I guess there's no such thing as a sheep boy.
No, there isn't. Yeah. They're cowboys.
All right, so let's just get right down to it. This is the gay cowboy movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the gay cowboy book that was made into a gay cowboy movie.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, what was your experience? What would you say your experience was as someone who had never... had heard, like, had the cultural understanding of what this was, but had never read or seen it before? What was your response to reading this book? Was it what you expected? Was it not what you expected?
Well, here's the thing that was really nice.
Yeah.
I actually think that's a great question because we're going to get to the movie in a minute, and it was really, really hard for me throughout the 2 hours plus of the movie to kind of divorce myself as a viewer from the movie I was watching and everything I had ever heard about this movie in culture. With the short story, though, it was super, super easy. And I think one of the reasons for that is Proulx, for me, and I haven't read much Annie Proulx, her prose is so consistent and so distinct that it actually became really, really easy for me to forget about Brokeback Mountain, the gay cowboy movie, while I was reading it and just read it as a short story.
Yeah, her prose is very distinctive. I mean, she has a very literary style of writing. And it's interesting as someone who had seen the movie, but like many years ago, how close a lot of the dialogue hews to what's in this short story. But her prose is very specific in terms of its style. She definitely has a voice, and the bulk of the book, and it's only like a 51-page short story, like printed on very small pages in very big font, so quite a short story, is like descriptions of the scenery and like what Montana and Wyoming are like in different seasons of the year. It's kind of 50-50 nature writing and the story of these two guys. It's less about them than you might think, and kind of more about the larger forces of the world that they've gotten caught up in. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think this kind of speaks to how smart she is as a writer, because everything she's doing is she's trying to play on stereotypes.
Yeah.
That's this entire story, isn't it? Do you know about, so I was watching an interview with her. Do you know kind of where the genesis of this story came from?
No.
So she was in a bar in Wyoming. She lived out west. I'm going to walk that back for a second. She was in a bar out west. I think it was in Wyoming.
That's fine.
I think that's where she was living.
In the back of the book, it says she lives in Wyoming.
Yeah. So she was in a bar, and she saw a bunch of young, like, cowboys and ranch hands who were playing pool. And against the wall, she saw an older guy who, like, I think clearly in an East Coast mentality, he should be retired.
Mm-hmm.
But Like, he was clearly still working.
Yeah.
And she said she saw him looking at this table of younger guys, and the best word that she could use to describe the way he was looking was longing.
Mm-hmm.
And the thought just got in her head, what if he was gay?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the story came from.
Yeah.
So it came from a direct observation of someone. So I think there was a desire on her part to present the context of these characters as accurately as possible,
Mm-hmm.
because where they are and what they do is what's central to the story. Like,
Oh, yeah, 100%.
right. No, that's what I'm saying. I'm not
Yeah.
saying anything that's crazy.
Yeah.
But like, these two guys, yes, they're young ranch hands, but where they live and the culture that they live in and the land that they live in is so central to who they are. She has to describe all of that stuff.
Yeah, they're sort of stuck in their time and place in a way that she presents as unchangeable. Like, throughout the book, there are mentions of, like, we could go to Mexico, we could go to San Francisco, we could go to these places that we sort of have heard of as being more liberal, but it sort of comes down to no, we're stuck here. It's kind of like, I don't know, like Three Sisters or Waiting for Godot. I almost said Waiting for Guffman. Waiting for Godot. Like something where the people keep saying, we'll leave. They do not move. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the interesting thing is that she wrote this actually before Matthew Shepard was murdered in Wyoming, but not that much before.
Like a year.
Yeah. And, you know, this is set in the 60s in Wyoming, but written in the 90s in Wyoming. And certainly, like, it must reflect a certain culture that she saw around her, because, I mean, I would say that, like, Matthew Shepard is in the top 5 or 10 cultural moments that I remember in my lifetime, like way up there with 9/11 and Columbine, you know, like all of these things that just take over the national consciousness. And certainly one of the things that I still think about if someone mentions Wyoming, I think of Matthew Shepard. And I sort of think that association in my mind, which may or may not be fair or accurate in 2018, is, oh, Wyoming, yeah, they hate gays there. Again, like that may not be true anymore, but it just is interesting.
I think it's always probably been more complex than that.
Yeah, of course, but like it is interesting that state is associated with both of these, both a fictional and a non-fictional event. In that way.
Yeah. No, I think one of the things that's interesting about the writing of the story is that it does take place over the course of 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like in a lot of stories, when you see a long span of time happen, and we're talking about characters going through something that has to do with social growth. So for example, acceptance of gay people in this country, there's usually some kind of societal change across the 20 years of the story being told.
Yeah.
But not in this one.
Not in this one.
Like,
no.
the fact that it's 63 and 83, like, between 63 and 83, doesn't...
It may as well be 100 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, nothing changes for them.
That's right.
But to jump back to something earlier that you were saying about the language, about how specific her language was, that was actually something that I thought was really interesting, because in the story, she, the narrator, speaks very differently than her characters do.
Yes.
But the thing that I thought was interesting in the movie, which we'll talk to more in a little bit, is that they actually take some of the, I don't want to call it dialogue, but some of the words that were used by the narrator in the short story and actually put them in the mouths of the characters as dialogue. And those were the few times in the movie where I thought the dialogue didn't work.
Interesting.
Something didn't sound right about it.
Because she's so specific about the way that people speak and the way that her narration flows.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I give just one example of it?
Yeah, of course.
So this isn't like exact dialogue.
Yeah.
But this is the best example that I can think of off the top of my head. So Ennis and Jack meet each other and they're telling each other about their life stories. So Ennis, I'll just read the line here.
Mm-hmm.
Ennis, reared by his older brother and sister after their parents drove off the only curve on Dead Horse Road, leaving them $24 in cash and a 2-mortgage ranch, applied at age 14 for a hardship license that let him make the hour-long trip from the ranch to the high school. That concept of being left $24 in cash by the parents, that to me is a very writerly observation.
Yeah.
Like, that's not something that I would hear someone saying to someone they've just met. But in the movie, when they meet for the first time, and now the character of Ennis, we as an audience have to hear the character of Ennis tell this stuff to Jack.
Yeah.
He does refer to the fact that his parents drove off. They found the only curve in that road.
Yeah.
And they left him $24 I think it's like a
Coffee can or
coffee
something.
can. That to me feels like a very poetic observation, but I don't think it jibes with the type of dialogue in the book.
Right.
I don't think these characters talk that way or make those observations.
Yeah, well, it becomes pragmatic because he's an incredibly pragmatic character. He's not one given to much introspection.
Right.
But it's an introspective observation.
Right.
So let's take it back a second.
Okay.
Because you're giving names, you're giving events, and these poor listeners may have no idea what we're talking about. Let us talk about the plot of the short story Brokeback Mountain.
So Ennis Del Mar and Jack Twist are two ranch hands that meet in the summer of '63, and they're both hired to watch sheep up on Brokeback Mountain.
Yes.
And the whole idea is one of them will make camp, and the other one will sleep out with the sheep to make sure they don't get eaten by coyotes.
Right.
While they are up on the mountain that summer, they fall in love.
They fall in love. Like, let's just say they fall in love.
They fall in love, and then the summer ends early, and they go their separate ways, and they don't see each other for 4 years.
Yes.
And within those 4 years, they both meet women and get married, have kids.
Yeah.
And then after that, they come back into each other's lives. And for the next 20 years, what would you say, like annually, semi-annually?
Semi-annually, at least, continue to meet on fishing trips.
Yep.
Fishing
quote
trips.
unquote fishing trips.
I'm doing scare quotes. Fishing trips.
And the rest of the book is essentially that next 20 years.
Yes.
And we see little pieces of their lives with their families. And then within that 20 years, a bunch of small things happen. Ennis's wife sees the two of them together.
Yes.
And
very soon, like the first time Jack comes to visit.
Right.
After the first 4 years have passed.
This, among other things, leads to their divorce.
Yes.
Eventual divorce. So he is now living single, but still near his family.
Yeah.
He lives up in Wyoming. Jack lives down in Texas. Then, after 20 years, after these liaisons, Jack dies.
Right.
And that's the end.
That's the end. So
that's basically the plot.
Yeah, I mean that's basically the plot. I want to go
There's
into
a lot of flavor that we've left out.
Yeah, I want to go into a couple of complexities of the two characters.
Sure.
Because I think the thing that I don't know, sometimes maybe gets forgotten in sort of the sort of cultural knowledge of Brokeback Mountain, like the gay cowboy movie, right? Is that after this one summer on Brokeback Mountain, their lives become extremely different. And I actually also think that their attitude towards the relationship becomes extremely different. So Ennis continues to live in Wyoming. After a while, he gets divorced. He has these two daughters, and his ex-wife gets remarried. Those are all things we know from the book. And the other thing we know about the way that he kind of sees his life going is that he is not the kind of guy that wants to work a 9-to-5 job. He has a real love of working outdoors and with animals, but the thing that comes along with that is that's not really very steady employment. He's always hiring on for a season somewhere and then, having to go somewhere else. So he never really gets ahead. Whereas Jack is sort of more of a go-getter. He has sort of more dreams and aspirations for his life. And the thing that we know about Jack right off from the start is he loves the rodeo. Well, he doesn't love it, but he sees it as a really good way of making money. And he goes down to Texas to do the rodeo, and he meets the daughter of moderately wealthy man and marries the daughter and goes to work in the father-in-law's business. And the thing that I think is really interesting is that while it would appear that on the surface that Ennis is less successful in his life, he's actually sort of more contented. He's a much more stoic person, whereas Jack is always hoping for something better, and he's unable to live with discontentment, I guess, in a certain way. And he's always the one pushing for let's get a place together. Let's leave our wives and go, and we'll work my dad's ranch. We'll get a house somewhere. We'll go somewhere. We'll do something. Let's build a life together. And Ennis is, for 20 years, Ennis is the one saying we can't. We've made our beds and we have to lie in it. And in the end, I think what we learn is that Jack finally gets fed up and makes some decisions about being with somebody else that he's maybe not as discreet about, and that ends up getting him killed. Right?
I guess so. I mean, if we're going to have the conversation about how Jack dies,
yeah,
I just wonder how ambiguous or unambiguous it is.
I mean, Ennis, in both book and movie, it's Ennis's speculation as to what happened to him.
Mm-hmm. What's the official story?
The official story is that he was trying to do some kind of car repair and like a tire blew up in his face and he died. There's actually very gross imagery of like it hit him in the face and he fell backwards and he drowned in his own blood.
Yep.
But Ennis is pretty sure that he was having an affair with someone's husband, and some good old boys found out about it and killed him. Because Ennis has this memory of, and this is in the movie too, but Ennis has this memory of the reason that Ennis does not want to uproot his life and go and live with Jack as a couple is that he is afraid, because he has this really strong memory of these two guys from his childhood where he grew up that lived together, and there were rumors about them, and one of them ended up dead one day, and his dad took him to see the body. And he doesn't want to end his life like he knows for a fact in his mind that is what will happen to him, and sure enough, that is what he thinks ends up happening to Jack.
This, more than any other episode that we've ever done, I struggle with making determinations about what happens in the plot and what happens in the inner life of the characters. I'm going to say something now that's going to come up. I think I want to have a longer conversation about it later, but I want to mention it now. This story and this movie, more than most that we've experienced, certainly for the show and certainly in my life, there is an abundance of ownership that I see readers and experiencers of the story putting on it. I think that if we really strip it down, that's one of the reasons why I really like finding out where the kind of the genesis of the story came from, of Annie Proulx in that bar, because it allows me to simplify everything. But I think this story is going to represent so many different things to so many different people.
Sure.
I can almost guarantee a huge number of people who are, like, they don't find it ambiguous the way that Jack died.
Yeah.
Like, no, Ennis is right. Of course, Jack got killed by bigots.
Yeah.
That's what happened. Why would you even have I can hear them saying, like, why would you even have a conversation about that being ambiguous? Clearly, it's not ambiguous. You know the country that we live in. You know what this place is like. And then there are also going to be people who come at it from a perspective of, well, how much does this tells us so much about the way that Ennis's mind works and what his experiences have been. By definition, it has to be ambiguous because that tells us so much about Ennis as a character.
Right.
And if Jack did truly die in a freak accident on the side of the road,
then what's the point of Ennis having had all of these fears for 20 years?
Unless it's just as an illustration of what this culture does to a person like Ennis. Because Ennis is convinced.
Oh, yeah.
That's the only thing we know.
Yeah.
Ennis is convinced.
Well, and the funny thing is in the book, it's kind of represented in a single line. He's on the phone with Jack's wife, and Jack's wife says something. Oh, no, I'm sorry. The moment that he thinks this is when he goes to visit Jack's parents.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And Jack's dad, this is in the movie too, and Jack's dad says something to him like, oh, yeah, he always used to mention you. He said you were going to, for years and years, he said you and him were going to come here and whip this place into shape. And about a year ago, he stopped mentioning you and started talking about this other guy that was going to come leave his wife and come work the ranch with him. So the line in the book is, I'm just going to read this, Jack's dad has had this whole paragraph about how he used to talk about Ennis, and he doesn't talk about Ennis anymore. He talks about some other guy. And the line is just, so now he knew it had been the tire iron. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
It's not in depth. It's not detailed. You might miss it. But clearly in Ennis's mind, something very specific has happened to Jack. There was some other guy, and they got too careless in front of the wrong people.
Yeah. And I think in the book, it's allowed to be... I like the ambiguity of it because just as a reader, considering the fact that all of these characters are fictional.
Yeah.
Like, this story did not happen. Stories like it, I'm sure, have happened, but this story did not, which means me as a reader, I can kind of decide whatever the truth is for me.
Yeah.
As a reader, I'm more interested in it being truly ambiguous and being more of an illustration of what's going on inside Ennis's mind than I am of it representing what's going on in the culture.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying whether it did or didn't happen. I'm just saying, as a reader, that's what's more interesting to me.
Yeah.
But I guess I also understand where people are coming from who trust Ennis and trust his judgment.
Yeah.
And when he says it was the tire iron, they think, no, that's what happened.
Yeah, he's a reliable narrator.
That is what happened.
Well, I want to go back for a second to something that you said a few minutes ago, which is that the book is written in such a way that you, the reader, can take away from it what you want, because this is something I was thinking about as I was reading the book. We keep mentioning the movie. I think we're just going to need to move on to the movie in a second.
Yeah.
But so this movie came out in 2005, and just, again, like this thing in the culture, I think there are so many people that haven't seen this movie and certainly haven't read the story that know this is the gay cowboy movie.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they're gay. Like, this is my perspective on it in 2018. Both of them, I don't think the issue is that they're gay. I think the issue is that they fell in love with someone that they felt that they couldn't be with, and then they went and married other people, but still being in love with the first person. Like, the issue isn't that they're gay. The issue is that they're cheating on their wives, right?
I guess I do see what you're saying. I think I've come to a different conclusion than you have over the last week or so.
Well, let me finish what I was going to say, because I think people are now going to be mad. I think when this movie came out, there was such a dearth of representation and stories about queer love visibly represented on screen, especially in a very tender and very loving and very positive way. That, and I don't blame anyone for feeling this way, people saw representation and they went, yes, that. I've never seen myself on screen before, and this is me, and I am gay, and these guys are gay.
And just to jump in for a second, this is exactly what I was talking about before in terms of the amount of ownership that people feel over this property.
This is what I'm responding to.
Yeah.
But I think in 2018, we have a little bit of freedom to have a little bit of a more nuanced understanding of sexuality. And I guess I quibble with anyone who can determine that they know the sexuality of a fictional character who doesn't actually exist. But I think to insist that these characters are gay and can be nothing but gay is a point for bisexual invisibility, right? Like, do you agree with that?
I do. My opinion about this subject is complicated.
Yeah.
I don't have like a thesis on this. I don't have one thought about this that kind of ties everything together. What I do have are a couple of different kind of thoughts and observations. It's really hard to know what the intention is of an author.
Yes.
But I was really happy to hear that interview with Annie Proulx, because she defined the genesis of this idea as looking at someone and saying, well, what if you were gay?
Right.
Okay. So I have that. That tells me the characters are gay.
Yeah.
That doesn't tell that tells me the characters are not bi.
Okay.
That tells me that they're gay.
Because the author said, what if they were gay?
Right. Here's a second thing.
Yeah.
Yes, we're talking about an understanding of sexuality in the 90s.
Yes.
And even in the last 20 years, our understanding of sexuality in pop culture, like obviously none of this is like new information, but in terms of acceptance of people across the spectrum in the LGBTQ community. LGBTQ plus, is that?
Whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
I just say queer.
Right. Our understanding of people across the LGBTQ community has, I think, increased in terms of a cultural understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think people are much more willing to have a conversation about shades of queerness.
Yeah.
So it's not, yes, maybe they're not gay. They're probably bi.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm saying this as someone who is bi.
Right.
I want them to be bi.
Right. I also do.
that fits more with our current understanding of sexuality.
Right.
Understanding's the wrong word, because it's not like people didn't have that understanding before. It fits with our current acceptance of queerness.
Yeah.
So that's me.
Yeah.
And then here's the third part. If we as readers and viewers choose to identify with these characters and kind of, this is going to sound really touchy-feely.
Yeah.
If we want to let these characters into our hearts, we have to meet them where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And what these people don't need is us applying labels to them.
Well, yes, go ahead.
So I kind of bristle a little bit at just even the conversation of labeling them as gay or bi.
Well, that's why I think we're almost saying the same thing.
Oh, totally.
Which is that my original thesis 20 minutes ago was I don't like calling this the gay cowboy movie. And maybe people don't even call it that anymore.
But I don't like not calling it the gay cowboy
Right.
movie. I'm not saying we shouldn't call it the gay cowboy movie, or we should. I just think it's interesting that label may be 100% correct.
Yes.
That
It
may
be.
actually be the perfect label for it.
It may be. I think what I'm saying is that now, nearly 20 years later, in a world where we are privileged and have come a long way to have many, many different types of positive representation. Certainly not enough. Certainly not on terms of equality. But we have made a lot of progress in terms of having positive representation of all kinds of different people. I think maybe, and I think we're saying the same thing, I think maybe going back and looking at this, we don't need to force labels onto it because we have a lot of we can just let it be what it is because we're not so desperate and so hungry for any kind of representation that we put labels onto these characters that they themselves would never have owned. Like if you said, I'm really speculating here, but if you went up to Ennis Del Mar and said, "You, sir, are a gay man," he would punch you in the face. Like, he doesn't identify that way.
We'll get into the violence in a little bit.
But that again, like we haven't even talked about toxic masculinity yet.
Let's hold off on that.
But they both very, like, again, a bit unreliable in terms of how they self-identify because there's a lot of fear and a lot of cultural stuff around this. But they don't identify as gay. Neither of them do. They have a conversation where one of them says, "I'm not queer." "Oh no, neither am I." Maybe they are, maybe they're not, and they're just bluffing. But like, this is not how these characters self-identify.
Mm-hmm. And that actually, I want to go back to something you said a minute ago because that actually, I think, is my final point that I forgot I was going to say, but I was just reminded of it. One of the other reasons why I'm kind of fine now being okay with calling it the gay cowboy movie.
Mm-hmm.
Is because this piece of art stands at a certain point in history.
Yeah.
Like, we can make new art. We can keep making new stories.
Yeah.
Let's keep making new stories. We don't have to continually redefine older stories instead of making new ones.
Yes.
So let's keep making new stories, but let's not spend so much time trying to redefine this older story.
I like that.
It exists at a very specific point in time. And you know what? As far as the way we talked about these kind of things goes in the late 90s and the mid-aughts, it's the gay cowboy movie. They're gay.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I think you're right. There is a lot that I think we look back on now. I mean, the birdcage is a very prime example.
Mm-hmm.
When we did an episode on the birdcage, which is stuff that was created before we had a very wide range of representation that we look back on now and we're going, a lot of this is problematic. Queer as Folk is this TV series that I don't think I shall revisit anytime soon because I think I'm going to have a lot of problems with it. I mean, the L Word, like all of these sort of like mid-90s queer pop culture stuff that I think we look back on now and go, wow, that's problematic. But as you're saying, like, let it be what it is. Like, let us look at it as something that was important at the time in the culture that we have now moved on from. I mean, I think about this with a lot of, again, the birdcage as well. Like, with the birdcage is not good on trans stuff.
No, it's not.
Right? But perhaps it was one of the first really positive representations of someone who was pretty genderqueer, right? Even if it doesn't come across great now, I bet that's a really important movie to a lot of people. I don't want to speculate on anyone else's experience, but I bet that is a really important movie to a lot of people for how it portrayed gender, though there may be problematic elements today.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm going to say this next part hoping to start a conversation. I would love to hear people's reaction to this kind of way of looking at it, but I don't think I'm alone in thinking of representation as a pendulum,
mm-hmm.
where the pendulum is swinging to one side where you have no representation whatsoever. The pendulum is going to overswing its mark.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to. And I think you have to get to a point when you're looking at the history of representation, there has to get to a point where we're okay with incorrect representation because it is representation, knowing that it represents a point on a journey where it will swing back to accurate representation.
Yeah, I think we're on the swing back.
Yes.
And that's I think what we're saying is that there was a point where any representation was fine because it was better than zero. And I think now the general cultural concept is, no, we have enough representation that we can actually rank it and say that this is poor and this is good.
Yeah.
But I think this was still at a time when any representation was something that people were really hungry for.
Do you want to talk about this movie?
Yeah, I want to read the back of the DVD here. I'm excited about this. Okay. Brokeback Mountain is a sweeping epic that explores the lives of two young men, a ranch hand and a rodeo cowboy, who meet in the summer of 1963 and unexpectedly forge a lifelong connection. The complications, joys, and heartbreak they experience provide a testament to the endurance and power of love. Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal deliver emotionally charged, remarkably moving performances in, quote, a movie that is destined to become one of the great classics of our time, end quote.
I have so many problems with that.
I have some real problems with this. This is straight washing.
Yeah, no, that is a big thing.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. That's not the problem I have with it. I think our problems are in the same like hemisphere, but are slightly different.
I would like to describe, I've never done this before, but I want to describe what pictures are on the back of this box.
Sure.
Okay. There's a picture of the largest picture, which is the background to all of that text, is the two cowboys looking at each other from about 3 feet apart. Then underneath, there's a series of like 4 smaller like square pictures. One is Heath Ledger looking very handsome, smiling at the camera.
Well, he often does that.
One is Jake Gyllenhaal looking kind of pensive at the camera, but both by themselves, and also I just want to point out far away from each other, like on the far left and the far right. And then in the middle is a picture of Heath Ledger with Michelle Williams with her head on his shoulder, and a picture of Jake Gyllenhaal and Anne Hathaway dancing and smiling at each other. So you could be forgiven if you thought that the romance of this movie was contained in those 2 shots of the 2 men and the 2 women together, because the only pictures where someone is looking happy is the sort of male-female couples.
Yeah. Well, Heath Ledger looks happy, but he's alone.
In
that one picture.
He's a handsome man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm coming around on this. R.I.P. I think you could be forgiven if you got this DVD and knew nothing about it. About 20 minutes into the movie, when the first makeouts start to occur.
Hang on, I want to do a dramatic, a hypothetical dramatic reenactment of
someone who just thought this was like a wholesome cowboy movie.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
What? And scene.
Because I want to be clear, like, I feel like there's a lot of movies where the romantic tension really ratchets up, like, throughout the course of the movie, and then there's, like, a tender lovemaking scene. This movie, and this is from the book, straight from the book, but, like, there's a very graphic sex scene very close to the beginning of the movie, and then it sort of gets more tender as they go on in years.
I feel like I have so much to say about this scene.
Go, speak.
It was fine.
Yeah, it was fine.
Like, no. I want to be really clear about this.
Yeah.
I want to be clear about me having watched it for the first time in 2018. It is not a new thing for me as a viewer of media in 2018 to see sex represented between people of the same gender.
Right.
In mainstream entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
So when it happens in the movie, I'm already kind of culturally prepared for it.
Mm-hmm. It's not particularly shocking.
No. So it's really hard for me to put myself in the mindset of people in 2005 who were seeing this for the first time, where it was more shocking. Because the thing that impresses me most about the creators of this movie is that it is not presented in a shocking way.
No.
At all.
It's just sort of hyper-realistic.
In what way? I'm curious to know what you mean by that.
It's not soft lighting. It's not like swelling music. It's just like, oh, it's these 2 horny guys on a mountain. Okay, I guess we're doing this.
And it's presented in the same way that sex is presented in any movie.
Yeah.
And that I have a ton of amount of respect for that.
It also follows the book very closely.
Yes.
Yes.
No. I agree with you. but I want to go a little further with
Yeah,
that.
that's fine.
Like it is exactly what the book does in terms of where it is and what happens.
Yes.
But it could still be incredibly book accurate and be really salacious.
Yes. No, that's completely fair.
Yeah.
That's completely fair.
And so I agree with you, but I want to acknowledge that what you're saying is super subjective.
Yeah.
Like, I think we both think that you tell me if you agree with me. I think that the way the book chooses to present this action in terms of prose is very, very similar to the way that the creators of the movie chose to present it in terms of cinematic language.
Yes.
But they are inherently different art forms. So, like, that's a completely subjective statement that we just said.
Well,
I just said.
I have an opinion. I think this might be a first for our podcast, which is that I have an opinion about a director.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So Ang Lee is a director who directed this movie.
Yeah.
Here are the movies I have seen that he directed. A movie called The Wedding Banquet, about gay Chinese people.
Mm-hmm.
A movie called Sense and Sensibility, about repressed British people. A movie called The Hulk, or just Hulk, I believe.
It's just Hulk.
About a big green guy. And this movie, Brokeback Mountain.
Okay, let's go back for a second.
Yeah.
It's not just about a big green guy. It's about repressed emotions between a father and his estranged.
This is very
a son
fair.
and his estranged father.
I guess what I'm saying is that I think Ang Lee is an incredibly diverse director in terms of on the surface, the types of stories that he chooses, but I think he has a really distinct point of view.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that point of view.
I think Ang Lee is maybe one of the most emotionally intelligent directors I've ever seen the work of. Would you agree with that? He makes it seem really effortless. And the thing that makes it seem effortless is the fact that he doesn't talk about it.
No.
He doesn't say, what's really important to me is portraying emotion accurately and realistically in a movie. I've never heard him say that once. And yet, every time I watch something that he's made, I'm blown away by how present that is.
Yeah, I mean, here are my notes. I didn't take a lot of notes because I got kind of pulled into the movie.
Well, yeah.
Which this is I think we should just be clear. This is a very good movie.
It's incredibly good.
It's beautiful to watch.
I had kind of a weird... I've talked about the Jaws reaction before.
Yeah.
Which is... For those who haven't heard those episodes, I never saw Jaws until I was in my mid-20s, and then my best friend made me watch it. And at the end of the movie, I said, "This is a really good movie. Do people know?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, dude. Everybody, no, people need to know. We got to tell people that Jaws is really good." And he says, "Dude, everybody's sold on Jaws."
Yeah.
I had kind of a weird related reaction to this movie where it finished, and I thought, "Oh, this does deserve all of the accolades it's ever gotten and all of the love I've ever heard for it."
Right, which is why I'm kind of mad about this description on the back of the box, which I think you still haven't talked about all the things that you want to talk about. So give me 1 second.
Sure.
So basically, I take notes in bullet points. I only have 3 bullet points for this whole movie. Here's what I wrote. This is from the beginning. This is chronological. Jack is gayer. Bullet point 2, glamour shots of sheep. And then my third bullet point is just hot in all caps.
Was that for the kiss? The first one?
I think it was just for the boning. I think it was just for the whole boning scene.
I actually find it refreshing that you can look at this in just kind of an objective, sexy way.
It was sexy.
Like,
it was very sexy.
That's actually good. I feel like that's a good thing to be able to view this movie in that way.
I think so. Okay. What were you going to say about the back of the box?
You called it
straight
washing. It frustrates me that a story that is so simple and so specific and so heartfelt has to be pumped through. You know what? Like what was a pasta roller? What's that thing where you put the pasta through to flatten it out?
Oh, a pasta roller.
Is it a pasta roller?
I think so.
Cooking. So you take the dough, and no matter what the dough looks like, it's going to come through the pasta roller and look the exact same way.
Yeah.
It frustrates me that every story, regardless of how diverse it is, when it gets caught up by the kind of the Hollywood marketing engine, it's going to get pumped out in the same way.
A testament to the endurance and power of love.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
So the language is always very ambiguous. It's always very lofty. Hollywood marketing language doesn't talk in specificity.
Yes.
Hollywood marketing language will never say, these two men love each other.
Yeah.
No, hang on. These two men fell in love.
Yes.
Because that is...
And bones.
And that is 100% what happens in this movie.
Yeah, they fell in love.
This is one of the best love stories I've ever seen. There was something I read about it that I thought was great, where basically So this reminds me of something that I read about kind of the critical reaction to the movie. So Gene Shalit, you know him with the mustache?
Yeah.
He was describing, in his review, he described the character of Jack Twist as a sexual predator who tracks Ennis down and coaxes him into sporadic trysts.
No!
Hang on.
I'm offended.
Some viewers complained about this. So Glad basically got pissed about that.
Yeah.
I think rightfully so. And they made what I think is an incredibly astute observation. And they said, characterizing Twist that way was like calling Leonardo DiCaprio in Titanic a sexual predator for his romantic pursuit of the character played by Kate Winslet.
Yes.
I am not going to argue with the fact that the way this love story is set up is that there is someone who is pursued and someone who is the pursuer. Jack 100% is the pursuer in this story.
Yes.
And Ennis is the pursued. But in the way it's actually portrayed, it doesn't feel any different than any heterosexual love story where one person is the pursuer and the other one is the pursued. The idea that you would bring the idea of being a predator into this is this gross misunderstanding of this. I don't even think he watched it.
Super not. I mean, the reason that I wrote Jack is gayer is that there are definitely sort of these unspoken shots of Jake Gyllenhaal's face at the beginning of the movie where it seems clear to me that he knows he's interested in men. Does that?
Yes.
Do you feel like that's fair?
Yes. I as an also viewer,
yes.
I think that's fair.
I don't think that's in the book necessarily, although maybe it is kind of in a subtle way. I think it is.
I think it is a little bit.
I think it's clear from the book that he's had similar encounters before.
Well, okay. One of the characters takes the other character's hand and puts it on his penis.
And that is Jack.
It's in the book.
Jack does that thing.
It's in the story.
Yes. And then Ennis says, "I'm not into that," grabs him, and
his mouth says, "I'm not into that," but then his body says,
I'm going
into that.
to have sex with you in your butt.
Yep.
And everybody is super into it, and it's very consensual.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that the only thing in the movie that even slightly supports that is like at the beginning of the movie, Jack knows that he is interested in men, and I don't think Ennis knows that yet.
That is the impression I get from the way the movie was created.
Yes. And that's why I wrote Jack is gayer, because there's sort of these shots. But like there are also scenes in the movie, which again, I'm not sure that reviewer saw the movie, because there are scenes in the movie where Jack sort of hits on men and is rejected, and the response is like, "Oh, okay, I think I should probably get out of here because now you seem a little weirded out." Like he's not a predator. Like he's
I think I know what it is.
Yeah.
I do think Gene Shalit saw the movie. Also, his son's gay and had a lot of problems with this whole like back and forth between his dad and Glad.
Oh, good.
So I do think that this comes from kind of an older perspective where gay is something you can become.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So you can be someone who steps out into the world and goes, gay people are great. Like what? Yes, gay people are, and bi and trans and lesbian, like they're all great, and they make our culture richer, and they're people, and they deserve the same rights and respect as everyone else. You can walk out your door and believe that, but if there's also something in the back of your head that says, "Oh, but also you can
can be turned,"
you can be turned.
Yeah,
like that's kind of an unhealthy thing to have inside a larger, healthier viewpoint.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that.
And I think that the idea of someone being seen as a sexual predator in this way, I feel like there had to be some, I don't know, but I feel like there had to be some little bit of the idea that, oh, no, you can be turned.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think that's where it comes from.
I can see that. So I want to talk about a couple things.
Yeah. I want to talk about a couple things too.
First of all, usually something that we do, like 45 minutes ago, is talk about our personal histories with the film.
Yeah.
We didn't do that, and I'm just going to talk about this now. So as I mentioned, I think before, I saw this movie in the theater in 2005, and I have never cried so hard. I think I told you this story,
yeah, you
like
did.
As an example of this is a thing I never do. I never cry in movie theaters, but in this case, I lost my mind. Like I started to cry. I remember I started to cry maybe half an hour from the end, did not stop until the end of the credits, got up, was still crying in the bathroom, was still crying in the car on the way home. Like this movie really tore me up. on this viewing, I think I said to you, like, I'm not sure I'm going to cry. And I didn't. Like, I was fine.
Mhm.
And honestly, like, I think that, again, like, I think that just speaks to representation. Like, I had never seen anything like this. And it ripped my heart into many pieces. But now, it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, no, I've seen this before. Like, this is a thing that I understand and makes sense to me. And it didn't like attack me in the way that it did when I originally saw it in the theater.
Well, I think this goes back to the thing I was talking about before with the pendulum swinging.
Yeah.
Like, I actually think Brokeback Mountain represents the pendulum swinging back.
Yeah.
Like, the 80s and actually, like, further than that, the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, gay characters were always very overt.
Mm-hmm.
And now suddenly in the 2000s and with Brokeback Mountain, we have characters who are queer, who have none of the trappings of queer characters as presented previously.
Sure. Except this does fall straight into the kill all your gays trope. I feel like we have to mention. Literally, the trope works as we can never be together because one of us has died for the sin of being a gay.
I didn't say the pendulum had swung all the way back.
I'm just saying.
But
I feel like we'd be remiss for not mentioning
this
it.
is the pendulum swinging back.
No, I appreciate that.
Okay. Basically, what I'm saying is I don't think this is the pendulum swinging away from accurate representation towards really inaccurate representation. I think we've already hit inaccurate representation.
And it's on its way back.
I
appreciate that. Yes, I appreciate that distinction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the other thing that I think we should talk about real quick is the women in this movie, because we haven't really mentioned them yet.
No. Well, if we're going to talk about the characters, I want to get something out of the way really quickly.
Go ahead.
So not appearing in this film, they all appear.
Yeah.
It's not a thing.
Not a thing?
There was there is a quote that I found from Annie Proulx that so this movie was adapted by Larry McMurtry and his writing partner Diana Ossana
of Lonesome Dove.
Of Lonesome Dove and many, many, many books. Like the quintessential writer of the American West.
Yes.
Seems like a super cool guy. He like owns a used bookstore.
Oh, that's nice. Like where? In Wyoming?
In Texas.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. This was something that Annie Proulx said. I may be the first writer in America to have a piece of writing make its way to the screen whole and entire. That's not an understatement.
No, and that's like a pretty good endorsement of this movie from the writer of the original source material.
Every single line in this book, in some shape or form, is in the movie.
Every single spoken line, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. But everything that is written is represented in the movie.
Yes.
So no one doesn't appear.
No, and it's interesting too because like the book has like a tiny bit of flashback like right at the beginning, and I remember as we sat down to watch the movie, you turned to me and you were like, does this start like the book? And I was like, no, it doesn't. Like the movie is like, other than one single flashback, which I think they do with great effect, the movie is completely chronological. From beginning to end, which I think is really interesting. And
I maintain it still is chronological because the flashback is actually a visual representation of a story.
Yeah.
No, it's a visual representation of a story. No, he's not telling the story.
He's not telling the story. He's just thinking about it.
He is thinking it chronologically.
The one thing they choose to flash back on is when Ennis's dad took him to see the gay man who had been like beaten to death in a really graphic and horrible way. My feeling watching this was like they couldn't mess around with the timeline too much because of how the actors had to age over 20 years because they looked almost the same at the end as they did at the beginning. Although it was interesting.
I have an opinion about that.
Well, there's two flashbacks. There's the one with the thing that we just mentioned, and then there's another one which they talk about in the book is that Jack has this one amazing memory of the one time in his life he felt safe, which was when he was standing by the campfire on Brokeback Mountain, and Ennis came up from behind him and put his arms around him and like whispered in his ear. So that's also shown in flashback.
Yeah.
And it is interesting because they age these characters so subtly that by the time you get to this flashback, which is near the end of the movie, you don't really think about it. And then you're like, oh, wow, yeah, no, they did look young. Like they don't have like bad age makeup on. I think they do a really good job making them like slightly older, but really just late 30s. Like that's where the book ends.
I want to get my one like negative. I feel like I only have two negative opinions about this movie.
Yeah.
And I've already mentioned one, which is that not 100% of the dialogue sounds authentic to me in a way that it did in the book.
Yeah.
Because I think they do take dialogue.
Because they take narration and make it dialogue in a way that didn't 100%.
Right.
Because the dialogue in the book is so good and most of that was lifted pretty much word for word.
Yeah. So that is the definition of a quibble.
Yeah.
And the only other criticism I have.
Yeah.
And I only think it's a criticism because of how good Heath Ledger is in this movie.
Yeah.
I don't think Jake Gyllenhaal is as good as Heath Ledger in this movie.
I'm not sure I agree with you.
I know that's fair. That's totally, totally fair. This is a minor criticism. I think Jake Gyllenhaal is doing really, really good work. I think the work that Heath Ledger is doing is incredible.
I agree with you.
And that's in a couple of different ways. I think the acting job they're doing, but also I think they do a better job aging Heath Ledger
That's what I was about
than
to
they
say.
do Jake Gyllenhaal.
That's what I was about to say, because what I was going to say was I don't feel like Jake Gyllenhaal is called upon to do what Heath Ledger is doing in this movie. Like, Heath Ledger is like a broken man, but also fine. Do you know what I mean? Whereas
I would argue he's not fine.
He's not fine, but he thinks he's fine.
Which is often something that people who are not fine think.
I understand that, but that's what he's playing.
Yes,
like
yes.
that is a complicated thing to play.
Yes.
I think Jack as a character isn't as subtle as Ennis as a character, and I think his performance is not as subtle.
Okay.
Yeah.
I buy that.
Can we talk about the women?
Yes.
Okay. There are two main women in this movie, the wives of these two cowboys. There's Alma, who's married to Ennis. And when Ennis goes up to Brokeback Mountain at the beginning of the book, age 19, he's already engaged to her. He keeps saying, like, we're going to get married in the fall. And then there is Lorene, who is the daughter of this, like, farm equipment salesman.
Magnate.
Yeah, magnate of Texas, who Jack decides to court and marry. These characters are played by Michelle Williams and Anne Hathaway. Now, the thing that you mentioned to me is that Michelle Williams and Heath Ledger, this is how they met, right,
Yeah.
on this movie, which is really interesting because they have a lot of chemistry.
There's a really sweet thing that happens when I watch, like I always do, I watch all the special features, and there was this thing happening where Heath Ledger talked about how they got along so well in making the movie, and he just has this little throwaway at the end of his statement where he says, we got along so well. I mean, well, obviously.
Because they got married.
Yeah.
Aw.
It's real sweet.
That's really sweet. So can I do a quick sidebar about Michelle Williams?
Sure.
Okay, this is my encounter with Michelle Williams. So I went to grad school with this very nice young woman who was in the stage management program, and her name was Paige. And one of the things we had to do was the third year directors had thesis projects, and the first and second years had to work on those projects, like in tech roles.
What year was this?
2007.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Paige was stage managing this guy's production, and I was working on the sound. And someone said to me, or Paige had said, like, oh, my sisters and my mom are coming to see this show tonight. And I was like, oh, that's great. And I was walking through the lobby before the show, and I saw this woman that looked exactly like Paige, except she had blonde hair and Paige had very dark hair. And I went, oh, she looks just like Paige. That must be Paige's sister. She looks just like Paige. That's so funny. Paige's sister looks just like Michelle Williams. Paige's last name is Williams. Paige's sister is Michelle Williams.
That's very good.
It was just so funny because, like, I just recognized the face and I had never thought about it before.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just really, really funny. Anyway, that's a sidebar. Apparently she really liked the production.
Well, that's good.
I think Heath Ledger had already passed away at that point.
Because he passed away in the end of 2007.
He definitely had, because I remember her saying she was there with her boyfriend at the time. I'm probably no longer her boyfriend. I don't know what her current situation is. Anyway.
That's not the kind of show we do.
No. Celebrity gossip with Ariella Jeremy.
No, thank you.
So getting back to the female character, in this movie, who never meet and never see each other. I mean, I think the script and the actors really work hard to give these characters an inner life. But at the end of the day, there's not much that we know about them other than what's in the book, which is how they're seen through the eyes of their respective husbands. We don't see them not with them. We don't see anything. There are no scenes in which either of these characters are where their husbands or future husbands are not. And so therefore we're really seeing them very much through the eyes of those people. Does that make sense? You're kind of looking at me like you disagree.
We've never fully defined what it means for a character, for the female part to be underwritten.
No, I feel like it's more of a gut feeling.
Yeah. I mean, we throw around like the Bechdel test.
Yeah.
But that kind of, like, if you know about the Bechdel test, you know that it's also not a real measure.
Right. It's not real.
Of representation in a movie. my opinion coming out of this movie is that the women in this movie, because there are more than the two of them.
No, there's the
'Cause there's
young wife at the end. There's Anna Faris at
well,
the end.
there's also Ennis's girlfriend.
Ennis's girlfriend and the mother.
And his daughter.
And the daughters.
Who
And
we see throughout years.
yeah, and
There's
Jack's
a lot
mother.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of female
There
characters
is a lot
in
of
this
female
movie.
characters. No, you're right.
Every single one of them feels real
Mhm.
and feels like they have an inner life.
Yes.
And because the story is so clearly defined as being the story of these two men
Mm-hmm.
who are going through something
Yeah.
that is very specific to men.
Yes.
Like they are butting up against the expectations of our culture in that time and in that place of what men should be.
Yes.
This is a story about two men.
Yes. I think we're kind of saying the same thing.
But the conclusion I come to is that the female part is written perfectly.
But that's what I was saying.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's what I was saying.
Cool. I'm glad we agree.
I was saying that we don't see anything of them that's not through these two characters' eyes, but I wasn't saying that was a bad thing. I was saying that by definition we don't.
Cool. I'm glad we're saying the same thing.
I think we're saying the same thing. Yes.
This is a stressful episode for me.
I'm very sorry. We haven't had any jokes. Do you want to make a joke?
Farts are funny.
Oh, God.
Can we talk about toxic masculinity?
Please,
This
God.
is the thing that I have been holding in for an hour now.
Yes.
Okay.
What, a fart?
I want to talk about toxic masculinity.
Okay.
All right. I have opinions about this movie.
Okay.
I want to go back. I want to talk about the thing that I was talking about before, which is ownership.
Okay.
Which is audience ownership.
Yes.
I've read a lot of contemporaneous reviews and articles about this movie in the days since we have watched it.
The days and weeks.
And I think I went in at first looking for answers because I've finally seen this movie now.
Yeah.
Okay, I saw Brokeback Mountain. I saw the Gay Cowboy movie.
Yes.
I saw it.
And you read
now,
the book.
Yeah, now I got to know what am I supposed to feel about this?
Yeah.
I hadn't quite figured out how I felt about it. It kind of blew me away how sure everybody is who talks about this.
Mm-hmm.
And how sure people are given that their reactions are sometimes contradictory about how men live in our society.
How men are, essentially, yeah.
Okay. So there to me is one scene that is, I think, the most interesting scene in the entire movie. And it's the 4th of July scene. So for folks who've seen it and for folks who haven't, basically Ennis takes his wife and their two little daughters to the fireworks on the 4th of July. They're in a baseball field. And the whole town's there and everyone's real nice. And there's these two very kind of stereotypical...
Like Hell's Angels guys. Yeah.
Sit down behind them. And they're swearing and talking about
They're being
sex.
vulgar. Yes, they're being vulgar.
And Ennis tells them to shut up. And they don't. And he kicks one of them in the face. And there's this shot. And it's like one of the best hero shots I've ever seen in my entire life.
It's a hero shot.
It's insane where Ennis is looking down at them, telling them to fuck off, and the 4th of July fireworks are going off behind him. He's like silhouetted by these fireworks on the 4th of July.
Yeah.
There could not be a more American man because he is doing the thing that men are supposed to do. You're supposed to be forceful when you need to be, and you need to hit people who deserve it, and you do it to protect the women in your life. You do it to protect your wife and your daughters. That is what you do. That's what a man does. And it's so clearly playing on that trope. The struggle that I have is trying to figure out, A, what did the filmmakers mean by that shot? And B, how do I feel about it?
Yeah. Well, you showed me this little bit of an article that mentioned that. And I think... the thing that's interesting to me is the thing that article didn't mention, which is when the camera pans out and you see Ennis standing there, like bathed in the light of these fireworks, you also see Michelle Williams. And what she's doing is holding her toddler and her baby because she's gotten up and moved when this fight broke out. And she is freaked out and scared and mad. And she's not freaked out and scared and mad because she is scared of the bikers and knows that her husband will come to her rescue and defend her and her children. She's freaked out because she's seeing a side of her husband that she's never seen before and doesn't necessarily really like.
Yeah.
I think that is, I mean, it seems to me that Ang Lee, when he sets up his shots, is intentional. And you're seeing this hero shot of a man defending his women, but you're also seeing how the woman feels about it. And she's not into it. That's my opinion.
Yeah. That's kind of where I am. But I feel like I have to be really careful to say, this is what I see.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that this is what they were intending because I don't know.
Yeah.
But more than anything, this movie speaks to me as an indictment of toxic masculinity.
Of course.
And it's because so I read this article. I want to read this excerpt for a second. Mm-hmm. This is from the New Republic. This was written by Christopher Orr in 2006. One scene in particular, prominent in trailers for the film, but also absent from Proulx's story, captures Ennis's iconic stature. Attending a 4th of July fireworks display with his wife and small daughters, he's bothered by a couple of obscenity-spewing bikers sitting nearby. An encroaching hint of the vulgar, modern counterculture? When they fail to respond to Ennis's terse request that they temper their language, he knocks them to the ground and stands over their cowering forms, heroically silhouetted by the rocket's red glare. Even if it weren't evident from the rest of the film, that scene establishes that Ennis is no ordinary cowpoke. He's the Marlboro Man. He's Clint Eastwood. He's John Wayne.
I disagree with this.
I disagree strongly. And I read the entire article looking for
when he says, but.
But, yeah, I was looking for the but, and I never found the but.
You just said found the but.
Well, Ennis found the but.
Oh, no.
So, in this entire article talking about kind of Ennis's, let's call it an appropriate display of violence.
Yeah.
Because that's what he's defining it as. This writer talks about the guys he hits as absolutely deserving it.
Yes.
And Ennis as being completely in the right. This guy's a goddamn hero.
Yes. But
never talks about later in the movie when his ex-wife confronts him about this relationship he's had with Jack for years. Doesn't talk about the way he grabs her and threatens to beat the shit out of her.
She's pregnant, by the way.
Yeah. It doesn't talk about how he goes to a bar and starts a fight with someone for absolutely no reason.
It doesn't talk about how in his last meeting with Jack, he threatens to kill him if he's unfaithful to him with other guys.
There's this really beautiful moment towards the end. There's one prop in the movie that is probably the most important, which is the bloody shirt.
Yes.
So Jack and Ennis were horsing around on the mountain, and Jack ended up hitting Ennis. They ended up hitting him in the face. He got a nosebleed, and he bled on his shirt, and then he thought he'd lost the shirt. Turns out Jack took the shirt, and he doesn't know until after Jack has died, and he goes to his family's house, and he finds Jack's shirt, and inside is Ennis's shirt.
Yes.
And they both still have the blood on them.
Yes.
And this is the thing he has, and this is the thing he takes, and this is the thing he takes of Jack's.
Yeah.
Violence is such a huge part of this story.
Yeah.
And it's such a big part of Ennis's life, especially. Annie Proulx talks about how quick Jack is to fight and how good he is in a fight.
Yeah, she basically says in the story, he doesn't get mad, he'll just punch you in the face.
Yeah.
You won't see it coming because he's so quick.
And I love a movie that's willing to use tropes to make you feel a certain way and then immediately undercut it to make you feel bad about the way that you felt.
Yeah.
In that moment at the 4th of July, I could not help getting caught up in the moment and just think, how great is it that someone like Ennis is there to kick the shit out of these guys that clearly deserve it? And that feeling lasted 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And then immediately I had to go back on myself and say, wait a second. I don't know whether the creators of the movie are trying to make me feel this intentionally, but it doesn't change the fact that I am feeling this. I, as a member of this culture, am complicit in the role that toxic masculinity plays in this culture.
Yeah. If you're pro-violence, I think this is what this movie is really saying. If you're okay with Ennis beating the shit out of these guys because they were doing something that he found distasteful, how is that different from someone beating the shit out of Jack and killing him because he's doing something you as a man find distasteful? I think they're really setting those up as opposites. No one should beat the shit out of anybody. I think that's what they're saying.
Yeah, I think that there's one word that I haven't used yet.
Yeah.
But it's the word that's been foremost in my mind since we went through all of this and watched it and read it. And that's the idea of being a victim.
Yeah.
I think some people bristle when you bring up the word victim because I think some people like to use victim as They use it as like a 4-letter word.
Mhm.
Like, oh, don't play the victim.
Yeah.
This idea of victimhood, you think you're a martyr and you're playing the victim.
Mhm.
So
But
I legitimately feel that every single character in this story is a victim.
of the patriarchy.
More broadly, yes. More specifically, victims of the actions of the other characters.
Yeah.
Like, no one in this story isn't a victim. They're all perpetrators.
Yeah.
Every single one. And the things that they're a victim of might be the patriarchy, like you say, something more general.
Yeah.
Expectations of what manhood should be. It might even be something that is absolutely direct. Alma and Lorene are victims of infidelity.
Yes.
And it's awful.
Yeah.
I feel fucking terrible. Alma especially.
Yeah.
Michelle Williams, she got nominated for an Academy Award for this.
Uh-huh.
And this is like 2 years after Dawson's Creek ended.
Yeah.
Fucking good on her.
Good for her.
She's amazing in this. My heart went out to her so much. And the only two people my heart went out to more in the movie are Ennis and Jack.
Right. But Ennis is the one that's hurting her.
Yes. Ennis hurts her directly and indirectly throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
He is not blameless here.
Yeah.
He is a perpetrator, but he is also a victim.
Yeah.
That's the thing that breaks my heart about this movie, which is, I think, one of the reasons why I didn't have this intense emotional reaction to the love story
Yeah.
and the way Jack dies and what that does to Ennis, because I'm so overwhelmed by how much everyone I have met up till this point is a victim. This one extra piece of plot isn't the thing that's going to send me over the edge.
Right.
Because I feel bad for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, just everybody. There's just this incredible sense of being trapped by something.
Mm-hmm.
I think for everyone that something beyond their control. And honestly, the person that I think pulls themselves out of it the most is Alma. I mean, in the book, she's given the active verb. It says she divorces Jack and she marries this other guy.
Yeah.
Because this other guy is going to treat her better. And that's kind of in the book. And also, actually, I think the movie, that's the end of what we see of Alma. But the rest of them are so beaten down to it. And you see them kind of make attempts to kind of drag themselves out of it, like the scene at Thanksgiving when Jack confronts his father-in-law and says, you know, this is my house, this is my kid, like, you're my guest, like, you're going to behave in the way that I want you to behave, and I'm taking a stand.
Mm-hmm.
And like,
or I'll hit you,
or I
will do violence unto you.
And you kind of see his wife. It's interesting because you kind of see his wife go, oh, this is good.
Yeah.
This is a good thing that's happening here. Like, I'm siding with my man over my father. But it doesn't last. It doesn't it doesn't succeed in kind of pulling himself out of this rut that he's in. Just everyone seems, as you say, like, everyone is just so beaten down by the expectation of what they are supposed to be, and they have a hard time imagining any other kind of life for themselves. As I say, I think Alma does the best job in kind of making a better life for herself and making her life even slightly better than what she seems like she's kind of forced into.
Yeah. I feel like the final thing, I don't really have that much more to say about it. The final thing is probably the thing I'm least qualified to talk about, which is, let's talk about the idea of the American cowboy.
Yeah. I have very little to say.
And the only reason I don't have much to say about it is because I think other people have said more. I think other people are in a much better position to talk about it and have a much more informed opinion of it. But the thing that the American West is defined by is kind of that manifest destiny, freedom. You know, give me land, lots of land, and the starry skies above don't fence me in. Like, that is what the American West is. I think one of the things I love most about this story is acknowledging that you can say that as much as you want, but the culture that they've created has just as many barriers as the one they think they're escaping from. Yeah. And they're all self-imposed. Yeah. Breaks my heart.
Well, it happens over and over again. Like, the only time these two meet, right, is they go up to the hills, up to the mountains and the rivers and the streams, and they're completely alone. And the thing that Jack keeps saying to Ennis is, it could always be like this. It could always be like this. We could just do this forever. And Ennis, I think, is very practical and probably right, that he says, it's always going to find us. We can never get away. This is a dream, but this is not life. Life is the thing that is this sense of obligation to do all of these things. Are you going to disagree with me?
Yes. I think, like Jack's death, saying whether Ennis is right or not has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Ennis believes he is right.
Yeah.
So let's examine why he believes he's right instead of examining whether he's right or wrong.
That's fair.
And all we have to examine is what's in the story, what's in the world that they live in.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I find that interesting. I want to end on this.
Okay.
I found an interview that Annie Proulx gave a number of years ago. And in the interview, someone asked her about Brokeback Mountain. And I'd like to read the question and her reaction to it.
Go ahead.
This was in the Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
What effect did the success of Brokeback Mountain have on your writing life, if any? And Annie Proulx said, Brokeback Mountain has had little effect on my writing life, but it is a source of constant irritation in my private life.
Oh.
There are countless people out there who think the story is open range to explore their fantasies and to correct what they see as an unbearably disappointing story. They constantly send ghastly manuscripts and pornish rewrites of the story to me, expecting me to reply with praise and applause for quote-unquote fixing the story. They certainly don't get the message that if you can't fix it, you've got to stand it. Most of these fix-it tales have the character Ennis finding a husky boyfriend and living happily ever after, or discovering the character Jack is really not dead after all, or having the two men's children meet and marry, etc., etc. Nearly all of these remedial writers are men, and most of them begin, I'm not gay, but ... They do not understand the original story. They know nothing of copyright infringement, that the characters Jack Twist and Ennis Del Mar are my intellectual property, and beneath every mangled rewrite is the unspoken assumption that because they are men, they can write this story better than a woman can. They have not a clue that the original Brokeback Mountain was part of a collection of stories about Wyoming exploring mores and myths. The general impression I get is that they're bouncing off of the film, not the story. There's more, but that's enough, okay? And I think that's kind of how I want to end this.
Yeah.
Like, I think everything we've said so far, for those listening, I think you've gotten what our reactions are to this.
Mm-hmm.
Quality of the movie,
it's great.
I think it's unquestionable.
I mean, is that our quadrant right there?
Yeah. Like, okay, let's break it down for a second. Let's do the quadrants.
Yes.
So we barely talked. It actually bums me out. We barely talked about Larry McMurtry and Diana Ossana.
That's okay.
They did
a great job.
A fucking amazing job with this. The script is incredible.
Yes.
Ang Lee did an incredible job. All the actors did an incredible job. The cinematography is amazing.
Well,
the music is amazing.
Wait, you're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's ask the question. Did the adapters care about the original source material?
This started with Diana Ossana and Larry McMurtry.
Yeah.
They wrote this before there was ever a director attached. This was something that was a passion project for them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I agree with you.
They absolutely cared. Everyone cared.
Did they do a good job?
Unquestionably.
It's very good.
This is one of those, it's so boring.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they cared and they did a great job. Yes, it's one of the best adaptations ever by those measures.
It's too bad there's not like some really, really, really terrible version of it out there. Well, I guess this is what Annie Proulx is talking about. There's some horrible ones that people keep sending her fan fiction, apparently.
Just super quick. You know that there's an opera, right?
No.
There's a Brokeback Mountain opera.
Is it good?
Well, okay. I don't know. I've heard it's good. In 2007, Charles Warrenen, who's a composer, went to Proulx and said, hey, we should turn this into an opera. She wrote the libretto.
It's great.
She was into it, and it premiered in 2014, and it was in English.
Great.
From what I've heard, it's good.
Yeah.
But, like, we can't talk about it because we can't see it.
Let's wrap up.
I don't want to just do the sign-off script. I loved this so much.
It was great. It was a real bummer. We had a lot of feelings about it. I hope that this episode is not too serious. It's a little bit serious. We didn't make a lot of jokes.
I hope it's the appropriate amount of serious.
I'm sorry.
But as always, this has been Adapter Parish. If you'd like to find us online, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AdaptCast. And if you tweet about the show, don't forget to use the AdaptCast hashtag. You can join our groups on Facebook and Goodreads, and you can also find and follow me on Letterboxd. If you have anything to say that's longer than a tweet, you can always send an email to adapterparishcast@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the show, there are two great ways you can do it. First, tell a friend. Second, a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice would be greatly appreciated.
I'm just going to say it.
Are you going to say it?
Yeah,
Are you going to do it?
I'm going to do it.
Why? Fine, do it.
I wish I knew how to quit you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.